Wall Street Journal NBC poll has Cain ahead of Mitt Romney 27 to 23%, with Rick Perry coming in third at 17% and Ron Paul in fourth with 11%. So how and why? Is it because he's attacking President Obama in ways that his Republican challengers cannot do? Take a listen to this.
He's never been a part of the black experience in America. I can talk about that. I can talk about what it really meant to be poor before I was poor. Yeah. He can't.
I can talk about what it means to be poor. He can't. Here to discuss is Democratic analyst and all-around good guy, Carl Jeffers. Carl, it's a pleasure. Before we get to what Herman Cain has said about the president and your interesting perspective on it, you were able to watch and listen to my interview just a few moments ago with Senator Santorum. Is the country really ready, in your view, for another George W. Bush compassionate conservative in the White House? I'm going to tell you and show you how to live your life.
Well, first of all, Judge, one thing I heard was interesting, because for the last couple of weeks, I've been saying that Herman Cain's 999 plan adds up to zero. Now Rick Santorum comes out and says his plan is 0, 0, 0. So he's going to triple down on what I've been saying all along. So that has some similarities. And by the way, when we want to talk economics, Santorum's economic plan actually makes more sense than Cain's, because Santorum's plan essentially, at least is tied in to creating jobs.
With you, but I agree with you on that, but I'm wondering if my ears deceive me. You are a California Democrat, and you're telling me you're in favor of cutting the corporate taxes from 35% to 0? They're not going to let you back in the Democratic clubhouse after that.
Well, I haven't been to the club today. I can tell you that for sure, with it being 100 degrees out here. But my point is, my point is, at least, even if we did that, I'm against it, but if we did that, that would be less painful than Cain's plan to essentially impose a 9% tax on everybody. That's my point. At least the poor would not be hit as hard by Santorum's plan.
In your view, does Herman Cain know what he's talking about when he says that the president has not experienced the black experience in America because Cain was born poor and became rich and the president wasn't?
Well, don't worry, Judge. I know this is the kind of conversation you don't have too often over there, so don't worry about not getting the words right. What Cain actually said was that Obama has never been part of the black experience. And here's the interesting thing, Judge. Cain should have stuck with the truth, because what he said was he's never been part of the black experience. That statement is false. But if Cain had said, I have actually a more consistent experience consistent with how blacks have lived in America than Barack Obama, he would have had a point there. Herman Cain grew up in the South, in the rural South, a poor family, worked his way up. Millions of black Americans have grown up that way. Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. Judge, when's the last time you met an African American who was born in Hawaii unless his father was in the Navy? You see what I mean?
I got it. I want to ask you this. I want you to take off the hat of somebody who wants Barack Obama reelected and wear your hat as a person who is a student of the American political scene. Can Herman Cain say things about Barack Obama that other Republican candidates who are white cannot say?
Oh, absolutely, Judge. And in fact, the book that I'm working on to come out next year is precisely about the fact that in America we have not had the conversation on race that we needed to have and that many of us thought we would have when Barack Obama became president. But understandably, he became distracted because of the major economic problems in the country. But Herman Cain can make statements that a white candidate cannot, and he can get away with it. But I'm going to throw one to you, Judge, that you could send home to. And that is that, however, as a black conservative, there are certain things that Herman Cain cannot do in terms of the race card that black conservatives don't get to do that. Clarence Thomas didn't get to do that, and neither does Herman Cain.
Got it. Carl, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Go back out into that 100-degree heat now. Warren Buffett reveals his salary and his tax bill to Congressman Tim Huelskamp.
What's been going on behind closed doors has, of course, been disputed. But his efforts were typical of a commissioner who has always seemed eager to be viewed as some kind of modern plantation overseer, treating NBA men as if they were his boys.
Is it right for Gumbel to bring race into what really is a fight over money? Let's ask Democratic strategist Carl Jeffers and Lee Hawkins of the Wall Street Journal. Lee, what do you make of this?
Well, if you're going to call him a plantation owner, then you also have to call the players slaves and figure out at what level of responsibility the players have for being slaves. When you think about 80% of the league is black and there's only one black owner. But is that David Stern's fault? Is that the owner's fault? No, it's the fact that they haven't worked together collectively like the UAW would and sit out and say, we demand more black owners. They haven't done that.
Carl, these players are anything but slaves. I mean, they are multi-millionaires who could walk away from their multi-million-dollar contracts anytime they want.
I think that's true, and I also acknowledge that I think there's some commonality of viewpoint here, because I think to answer your original question, it would absolutely be right for Bryant Gumbel to introduce race if, in fact, there was a real issue of race. I have never had the impression that David Stern wanted to be perceived as a plantation overseer, which is what Bryant Gumbel asserts. And, in fact, if you really want to know the truth, the assertions that Gumbel's making are probably more applicable to Roger Goodell in the NFL and how he treated Michael Vick and Pac-Man Jones than David Stern, who has a far different background that is much more amenable. And I also would say I applaud Lee's point. I have always said, David, that the players, the black players in both the NFL and the NBA, have to accept some responsibility. When Stern issues an edict about a dress code, and there's no dress code for the NFL or for the Hockey League, right, you could interpret that as taking advantage of the fact that there's a paternalistic approach. And I think that was wrong, but the players accepted it.
Okay, I get you, Carl. But the whole idea, Lee, of the fact that the players, what did the players get about 57% of the profits in the NBA?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a huge, if you have more than 50% of the company, that's an enormous, you can't call somebody like that a slave.
Exactly, and the black players basically are bringing in more than $1 billion a year alone themselves. In the 1994 lockout, the reason they weren't able to sustain themselves and sit out was because of the bad investment decisions that many of them have made. As a result, look, Kenny Anderson, he had 5 cars, he had alimony payments, he had 2 mortgages on homes, so they weren't able to sit out. That was their problem.
Well, what is Bryant Gumbel up to here, Carl? I mean, is he just trying to, I mean, he must have known this was going to create a splash.
Well, by the way, I would just add to that, strategically, the NBA owners were actually counting on the work stoppage going far enough that enough players would say, wait a minute, I need money, and we've got to get this thing settled. So that point is absolutely correct. Listen, Gumbel has his own agenda. And for Bryant, the fact is he's getting more play today. I mean, we're talking about him. I heard it on other programs. He hasn't had this much play since he left the Today Show.
Yeah, but you can burn out pretty quick once you take this route.
Bryant Gumbel is about ratings. But the problem with that is this is the first time I have heard Bryant Gumbel say anything about race and advocate for black people. The problem is when black people get in prominent positions, all too often, they don't even want to talk about race until it's financially or politically advantageous for themselves. He's pimping our struggle. People shed blood and were real slaves. Don't ever invoke slavery on the NBA. Wow. They're not slaves.
Lee Hawkins is fired up. Carl, I'm sorry, we run out of time. Carl Jeffers, Lee, thank you very much.
$1 bonus package for executives who run the joint and at its sister company, Fannie Mae. Taxpayers aren't the only ones who are outraged by this news. Senator John McCain lit up the Senate floor earlier today with some scathing words for the twin mortgage monsters.
That Fannie and Freddie Mac are synonymous with mismanagement, waste, outright corruption, and fraud, and their federal regulator has the audacity to approve $12 million in executive bonuses to people who make $900,000 per year. This body should be ashamed if we let this happen.
Ashamed if we let this happen. Here now to discuss with my freedom fighters, Fox Business commodities expert, and my colleague and friend Sandra Smith, Carl Jeffers, Democratic analyst, and Lenore Hawkins, Meritas financial advisor. Carl Jeffers, is this the first time that you and John McCain are going to agree on something? Come on.
Actually, no, because I agreed with John McCain when he supported comprehensive immigration reform. So there have been other issues where I've agreed with other conservatives and Republicans. When they make sense, I'm willing to listen. But in this case, Judge, even if there was not proof as John McCain put it, fraud, mismanagement, and corruption. The mere fact that, let's say they were running smoothly, the fact that they've lost so much money and had to borrow so much from the American taxpayers, to me, eliminates the opportunity to give $12 million in bonuses, just like I was upset with the entire Congress of the United States when they freed all that TARP money to the banks without restricting those bonuses to AIG and those other firms getting taxpayer money.
Do that.
I'm not sure which is worse, that we have to bail them out to a tune of another $6 billion, or that the clowns who caused us to bail them out to another $6 billion are entitled to $12 million in bonuses.
Look, I'm the first one to, defend bonuses, but bonuses when there is success and hard work and a company is prospering. Judge, clearly, these are companies where the government has had to intervene. The taxpayer's clearly on the hook now for the tune of $141 billion. I am going to quote Bill O'Reilly, and I'm going to say this is bonuses for pinheads. This is absolutely absurd.
You're allowed to do that on this show. We welcome it. Tonight's Freedom Watch is learning that your Food and Drug Administration plans on spending $600 million of your taxpayer dollars on an anti-smoking campaign that the FDA says will target, are you ready for this, youth, minorities, gays, the military, and people with disabilities. Where the heck is that list from? That means the government is not only burning a ton of your cash to fight a health hazard already widely known and reflected in dwindling tobacco sales, but it's targeting groups of citizens in what has to be the most insensitive federal nanny state scheme in years. I know you agree with me on this one, Carl Jeffrey, don't you?
Well, you know a lot more than I know, Judge, because I can't come along with you on this one. But we've been traveling down the path a little bit today, and I enjoyed that with John McCain, but we have to separate here. The fact is that the reason why the government is targeting those groups is because these groups have, in fact, a disproportionately higher percentage of smokers, and the proof is there that smoking is dangerous, does injure health, and increases health care costs.
Okay, we'll concede all that. Doesn't everybody on the planet know that? Do the taxpayers need to spend $600 million to re-educate us on it?
No, they should not be spending money on this at all. And Carl, I mean, Twinkies and chocolate bars are bad for me too, but the government doesn't have to go spend taxpayer dollars to go tell me that.
I know that. Smoking that can kill you. Smoking can kill you, though, and maybe you do need to be reminded of that.
All right, here's the point, Lenore. The point is that the government, again, just like with Fannie and Freddie, is not constitutionally authorized to do this, is not competent to do it, can't decide what legal products to target like this. It'll never outlaw tobacco because they know it'll be another prohibition, and they earn $50 billion with a B year, with a billion with a B every year in taxes on it.
The government's role is to create an environment in which our rights are protected and individuals are free to pursue their interests however they see fit. It is not the role of government to try to influence personal choices when it comes to a legal good. If the private sector wants to do that, then have at it. It can do it either through actual for-profit companies or through charities. But the government has no business trying to influence something that's already so well known. It's just more waste and abuse.
A bureaucrat in Florida has offered to have the legislature make it illegal to smoke in your own house in that state. Where will this nanny state nonsense end? I'll give you the last word. We got about 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, thank you, Judge. I don't agree with that because, there's no reason to ban it in your private home. We're not talking about banning smoking. We're talking about spending money to make you more aware of the costs. And when you talk about personal choice, this is a personal choice that is costing all of the taxpayers because so many of the smokers wind up having to go to public option choices for health care, which increases the cost for all of us. If the government can make these people spend less, it's positive.
All right. Carl Jeffrey, Lenore Hawk, and Sandra Smith, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.